Hi everyone! I am so excited to have our second English talk show. This is actually our 8th talk show since June, and we have so many amazing guests today. Christina, it's such an honor to have you here. And there are just so many things, from the hedge fund you have started in your dorm room to Forbes 30 under 30 to the nonprofit you're advising and to the book you're writing. So we'll try to get through as many things as possible. And if anyone has any question, just leave it either in a Zoom chat, Facebook chat, anywhere. I would love to get to as many of them as time permitted. So let's start with one question. So how would you introduce yourself at a cocktail party, Christina?
Oh man. Well, first off, thank you, Charlene, for having me, and thank you everyone for joining. I hope this will be an exciting session for you all. Try to keep it exciting. So when I go to a cocktail party, or let's say there's no quarantine anymore, and I go to like any regular event, I usually just introduce myself and just say I'm Christina, and then I'll say I work in finance. I usually try to keep it very vague. I actually don't like to say, oh, I went to like MIT, or oh, I started a hedge fund, because it actually kind of scares people. And actually when you're dating, it turns people off when you say like, oh, I work at a hedge fund. So I try to like not say anything and then slowly reveal the information if they're like okay with it. But yeah, like try to keep it humble and safe.
Got it. That's a very, very warm, very nice style. And tell us more about how you started. How did you start a hedge fund, which is actually have been trading at billions of dollars in a day from your dorm room? Like, how does that work out for you?
Yeah, I mean, so it always sounds kind of surreal when people talk about it. And even for me, I can't, like, I'm like, oh, really? We do this? But what happened was actually is my whole like career started as a result of many, many failures, actually. So in college, I wanted to study biology because I got top scores in biology in high school. And then I took biology in college and I got a C, and I was like, oh, maybe this isn't the right course for me. And then I saw my roommates who they were really good at biology, but they wanted to become like doctors, and see how hard they worked. And I was like, oh man, I can't compete with that. Like, I'm not going to get into med school. So then I switched majors a bunch of times, switched to computer science because everyone in today studies computer science. Got a C in computer science also. And so then at the end of the year, we had to declare our majors. There's a deadline. And I just declared the easiest major at MIT, which is called management science, which is basically finance plus accounting plus, I don't know, like marketing and other operations skills. And so I did that major, and it turned out to be really good. I got so lucky, because turns out finance is a really practical major. So like every summer, it was actually pretty like, not saying it was easy to get internships, but like compared to, let's say, biology, like where do you intern besides in a lab? So it was definitely a lot easier because there's so many financial firms. Even like nonprofit needs like a financial person, right? So many industries and sectors with finance people. I loved it. But then one summer I had a really bad internship. So I'll preface this. I didn't get a return offer, which also made me really sad. But the internship was kind of, it was an experience. I'll just say it here. It was in some country in Asia. I'm not going to say which country, but they made us like grab coffee every day for the team, for example. And they would like time you, and and depending on the situation, like if you don't come back within 5 minutes, you go on the ground and you do push-ups. And it
why do you have to grab coffee chat with people? Like, why?
I mean, just buy them coffee every day, like buy people on the team, because they're so busy, everyone's so busy, and the intern's job is to grab. And
oh my gosh, that's a real intern chat. Wow.
Yeah, and like that's okay. I think even for me, like if I have time, yeah, I'll grab coffee even today, like for my team, for my interns, even, like, because that's just a human good thing to do. But like every day, and then like you're paying out of your pocket, and then they time you, and like there's punishments, if you don't come back in time. Like, so that really drove me. At first I text my friend, I'm like, haha, I'm being paid to grab coffee, and then she's like, Christina, that's abusive. And I was like, oh really? And then, but anyway, I was a terrible intern though. I did such a bad job. And then at the end of the summer, I didn't get a return offer. And so I went back to school just feeling totally like crap. I'm like a senior now, I have to find a job. But then I started just trading on my own at nighttime. And so kind of like today, right now you hear in the news, everyone's using Robinhood and trading by themselves. Like, it's become a really big deal. So that was like me back in college. I started trading And then I was like, wait a second, like this is really exciting. And like I got really hooked and addicted to it. And then by total coincidence, so MIT is next to this school called Harvard. And at Harvard, I don't know, there's a stereotype that like Harvard kids are really rich. And like, I think it's kind of true because like my co-founder, so I met this guy through like some trading events, like competitions. And then he's like, oh, I go to Harvard. And then my roommate like his family runs a big hedge fund. And I was like, wait, what, a hedge fund? And then they gave us a little bit of money to kind of trade with. That's how we started the hedge fund initially.
And that's $1,000, right?
Yeah, it was not a lot of money.
Yeah, because I was like, maybe they can do a little bit more with the finances they have.
Yeah, so we started with just $1,000, and then around the time when we graduated, we started to be more serious, and we were like, okay, we need to raise more money. And then we actually ended up raising, the next check was $100,000, and also raised just completely by luck, I feel like. And like,
how did that happen?
So I was at a Microsoft pitch event. I signed up for every startup event in town, and like Microsoft had a pitch event, and they had 30 startups pitch, and they gave out like 25 prizes. And we didn't win any prize. Like I totally lost. We were like bottom 5. So embarrassing when there's 30 startups pitching and then you're like, you're bottom 5 because you didn't get a prize. But then, so I felt really bad and I was leaving the event and I thanked the organizer. I'm like, thank you so much. I want to just leave early. And so I just said thank you to her really fast. And she's like, oh, by the way, have you met this guy? And this guy named Gary. And I'm like, oh no, I haven't. And so she brings me over and introduces me to this like really old, he looks like he's 80. And she's like, yeah, he works in your industry. And I'm like, oh, really? And so I talked with him for a long time and he taught me a lot of lessons. Like, of course you're not going to win a pitch contest. Like you're standing next to company curing cancer, company curing poverty, disease. You're literally money-making machine. You're not going to be able to win any pitch contest. So I talked to him a lot. And at the end of the conversation, he brought out a checkbook and he wrote me a check for $100,000. And
wow.
I was like, holy, like I didn't know a bank could hold so much money.
Yeah. With the check you could deposit. Yeah, that's awesome.
So he ended up investing with us and being one of our earliest investors in the company. And so I went home and then I Googled him and he's like, wow, he turns out he's the CEO of $100 billion hedge fund in Boston.
And I want to focus on that moment a little bit more. What do you think stood out to him that made him give you the investment?
Oh man, I think so learning his story makes more sense now because he started his hedge fund in like 1970s when he was out of school. He was also young, naive, kind of like me, totally clueless, right? But he said someone was his angel. Someone gave him the first check so he can start to work full time and take on this job. And so he's like reaching 80, already past the age of retirement, and he wanted to pass the baton to the next generation. And so I think he's kind of saw a little bit of like, himself when he was talking to me and realized like, wow, the stuff we're working on is exciting and things that he could never imagine back in the 70s. So I think that was why he initially made the investment. And if you think about it, these guys, the people invest, they're billionaires, right? Yeah. And $100,000 it's, if you think about, imagine like Mark Cuban.
A cup of coffee.
Yeah, if you watch Shark Tank or any of those shows, like, $100,000 is nothing to them. So of course, like it makes sense to make that investment and then see what happens,
Got it. And what do you think, like, were you using, people are trading with Robinhood today, but I think the way to trade is quite different back there, right? So how do you actually trade? Is it through your laptop, PC, you're like writing software, trading it? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so we did what's called high frequency trading, meaning that it's algorithmic based. And so what happens is actually we basically take in all this data and then we analyze all this like data that's coming in and then put like algorithms on top of it. So they'll buy and sell depending on certain triggers and conditions. So maybe if a stock goes above this amount, then they'll buy. And then if it goes, below or above this amount, then we'll sell. And then it just depends on like what the environment is and what the conditions are. But it's basically, I imagine an analogy is kind of like, we look through a microscope at like very molecular, like the data that's coming in super fast that the human eye can't see. And then we're placing trades at that molecular level. And so, yeah, that's basically what we're doing. And we need a computer to help us to see that data better and to understand what's happening in the data. So we look at patterns in data too, like maybe some stocks are correlated, some stocks historically have different relationships with one another. And then we can use that to make predictions in the future on what's happening. So yeah, it sounds really complicated complicated. It's actually a lot simpler to kind of, once you understand, you're like, oh yeah, it kind of makes sense. Like, you're just doing trading, but just using a computer to help you make it a little bit faster and smarter.
It sounds like a lot of heuristics and rule-based stuff, right? And I don't know, is this popular during your time when you first started? Because in the today's world, there's like Jane Street, there's like, Bridgewater doing that. But I think back then it's not that popular, right? Like how did that idea came to you?
Yeah, it wasn't very popular back then. Nobody knew what high frequency trading really was, unless you like work in the industry. And then, but we started it mainly because like when you do regular trading, like if you're a discretionary trading firm, trading discretionary, like for my internship experience, I learned that you need like a lot of human brain power, insider information, researchers. Like my previous company I interned at, there's a team of like 100 researchers, that they visit like Apple and they're like, oh yeah, Tim Cook recommended, that this iPad, and then they bring it home and they're like, yeah, I'm going to buy Apple now. But we don't have that. We don't have researchers and that insight. But what we do have is just math and data and statistics. So we can just use like statistical analysis, instead of like the insider network knowledge type of stuff. So instead of human, insights, we kind of have the more machine insights, and that's how we kind of differentiated ourselves.
Got it. And as you build that out, what were some of the early challenges? Because I know that could be like say $1 billion made a day, but maybe also $1 billion lost a day. So what were some of the biggest challenges you had to navigate in the early days?
Oh man, I mean, a lot of the challenges I think are related to like just starting a company in general. For me, the biggest challenges I think were a little bit mental, because like I was rejected. Like a part of being entrepreneur is just like putting yourself out there, apply to every pitch contest, apply to, talk to every investor, and then you get rejected like every single day or every week. You kind of get used to like someone telling you no constantly. So that was one of the toughest things for me, was just getting used to the rejection after rejection, going to the Microsoft pitch contest, losing the contest, I felt like crap. And then, I'm glad that at the end of the day, I still won the jackpot of like getting an investor. But that was extreme luck, right? And you have to keep putting yourself out there, getting rejected. And then you ride this roller coaster of like, in one day, I experienced both huge rejection and then huge win at the end of the day. So that's very common in the startup world. I had another experience where we got another very big check written to us, actually by a Chinese venture capital firm as well. And then after we got the check, the next day, literally like an employee quit, and we were like really just so, just sad, because it's like, you never want anyone to, they quit. And, when you're an early stage founder, it's hard to take it like, what do you call it? Like, now I'm used to it. When someone quits, I'm like, oh, congrats, right? And like, you move on. But I think when you first start a company, because it's like your blood, it's your life, it's like when someone quits, it's hard to be like a robot. It's almost like you're emotional about that experience. So yeah, absolutely. It's all about rejection.
Wow. And was there any moment where your firm is almost killed? Like, was there a moment where you couldn't believe that you survived that day? And then, I feel like there may be a few of them.
Yeah, we had a bunch of experiences of really close calls to dying. We had one experience where so I have two co-founders, and actually all of them have like either, so Luca is from Singapore actually, and then my other co-founder Jonathan was originally from Hong Kong, and I was born in Beijing. So we're all kind of Asian, but we're from like different backgrounds. But anyway, there's one experience where all three of us were taking flights. We were all, I was on a transatlantic flight. Luca was on another flight from like Singapore, and Jonathan was flying to Florida. I don't know. We were all on a different flight. And then I landed in Boston around like 5 p.m. and I checked my phone. There's over 1,000 messages on my phone. And I'm like, oh crap, like something. And then there's all these missed calls from like all kinds of investors and employees, and everyone's trying to reach me. And I'm like, holy crap. And I call someone, I'm like, what's going on? They're like, yeah, the markets just fell like, like 20% or something. And I'm like, oh crap. And they're like, yeah, like we literally just lost like all this money. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I forgot how many we lost, a couple million or something that day. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Because I had never lost so much money in my life before. And, usually it's like we kind of gain little by little. Like the most we lose, maybe like 100,000 is considered a lot, like 70, 60,000 a day, but like a million, like 7-digit.
I know.
I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die. I didn't know what to think, and so I sat in the airport and just like worked all evening. I couldn't even take a taxi. I was like just sitting in the airport, just use their Wi-Fi and just like work the rest of the evening, and tried to, had to write a letter, explain to our investors like what happened. And then the investors were like, why were all three of you on a flight? If one of us was in the office or available on our phone, like we could have fixed the problem actually. But because we were all on a flight, like the risk of is a 1 in 100 chance of market crashing while three people are on a plane. So it happens.
And how did you recover? Because I don't know how many millions or billions of dollars the funds have at that time, but I'm guessing that's a huge loss, right? So how do you recover that back from that point?
It took us like 3 or 4 months to recover. Yeah, and it's hard because in finance it's different from like a tech startup, because in finance the amount you make or lose, it's going to be like tattooed on your record for the rest of your life. If I quit this company today and I go work for Goldman Sachs, Goldman's going to be like, well, give me your month by month performance for the past 8 years, and if I show them, they're going to be like, they're definitely going to ask what happened that day. And I'm going to be like, oh crap, so I can't just get rid of that record. It's not like I can do community service for 400, I can't, it's not like going to jail in America, where you do community service and then you're free. So in this world, in finance, like your results are your results, and that's permanent. And so all we could do is just make our numbers higher and continue going, recover from the loss, get back to positive numbers for the rest of the year, and also communication with investors is so important, because in that time, if I didn't, communicate with them, if I didn't tell them what was happening, they'd probably just pull out, they would probably just lose faith in me as a person, as a founder. And so it's really important to make sure to communicate to them, like, yes, we had this huge loss. Here's how we're going to fix it. And, here's why we're going to do better in the future. And like, no more like 3 people taking a flight, at the same time, like always have critical mass in the office, present at any point in time. So everything is important. Yeah.
Got it. And it sounds like you hinted at this, right? Authenticity, transparency, and just being really open with your investor. Because like there's another kind of hedge fund, which is more secretive, where there's like Flash Boy, there's the Wolf of Wall Street. We read so much about how things are done in the back room. We don't really know what's going on. So how would you describe your culture, and how has that uniqueness helped you or not helped you in the way you grow your fund?
Yeah, so usually the culture in financial firms, especially like quantitative trading firms, is usually very like known as competitive or very secretive or strict. Those are the usual terms you describe it as. I think like when we first started the business, one of the big things I wanted to do is make sure like that we were like fair and that we were as transparent as we could possibly be, and then try to be kind of more flat than other firms in terms of letting people who are younger, have more of a voice in the company, and that's okay. And so we do try to do more of that. I'll give you one example. Like when an employee joins our company on the first day, I always do the orientation with them, and then I let them know like, hey, we're here for you on your journey in your career. So if you find a better company, then go for it. If you want to use us as a stepping stone, as a ladder to go reach your next destination, your next goal, then that's great. And we'll be fully supportive, help you get the job, do the recommendations, whatever it is, so long as you're doing your best job and your most honest job while you're here. That's what matters, right? And so that way, like, it keeps everyone transparent. It keeps people, if someone says, hey, I'm not feeling too good, I need to take a mental health day or maybe find a better job for me, then that's great. We always explain that we understand that, we're not the best company in the world or for everyone. And I think it's very like every founder, should understand that as well, but I think at the beginning, when you start a company, you want to be the best in the world. So, but yeah, that's one of the things we try to do in our culture, to just make sure that everyone feels, comfortable while they're here. And if as soon as they don't, that's okay. And to just, let us know, and we can always help and figure out what's next for people.
And building on top of that, what are some of the competitive advantage of that? Either it's because I think in the high frequency trading firms, speed is so important, right? We see people were like trying to find a place closer to Chicago, or like places that could get even a millisecond or more just to beat the market. So what are some of those advantages that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think today, when you imagine like what is a high frequency trader, many people think about, they always think about like that image of building, the wires and cables across under the river and like over a mountain, across through a mountain, blasting holes and trying to be 1 millisecond, 1 microsecond faster than your nearest competitors. And the good news today is like all those fast routes between like New York and Chicago, for instance, these routes are all owned by vendors. And so
Mm,
we, as a high frequency trader, we don't have to do, any of that actually. And the
that's
barrier,
good.
yeah, the barrier to entry is really actually surprisingly a lot lower today in the hardware side. So all
Mhm.
you need to do is just pay the same vendor the same price that Goldman Sachs is paying, and you get the same speeds as Goldman Sachs gets. And so that's really great in terms of just the way that the industry has evolved over the years. But our edge has definitely changed because of it. So like 8 or 9 years ago, investors came to my office and like, "What's your edge? Why are you different from Goldman Sachs, I guess?" And
Yeah.
I just say like, "Oh, speed. We're faster than like all these other companies," and
Hmm.
that was okay. It was a good answer. But today, that same investor, if they asked me like, "Oh, what's your edge?" and if I said speed, they would probably laugh in my face and be like,
Hmm.
"Oh, what's wrong with you?" Because today it's like speed is no longer like an edge in many different ways in this industry. You have to be good at kind of everything a little bit. So
Hmm.
you need to have a team with very low turnover, people who don't want to leave you. If they leave you and start a competing hedge fund, that's like,
Yeah.
you don't want like situations like that to happen. Or let's say you need to have a really good and really solid, fast research cycle. So like researchers who understand and have a method of like when this strategy doesn't work, like don't just stubbornly keep going at it. A lot of researchers tend to be very proud of their strategies and emotional about it. So they don't
Hmm.
want to let go, but it's like, okay, we got to give them a time period of like, here's how you're going to test for this week and then run it for this week. And then if it doesn't work, then, we're going to move on. And so
Hmm.
a good research cycle as well is super helpful. And then having a lot of different strategies. So like we never rely on a single strategy for a really long
Hmm.
time. Making sure that there's, sub strategies, like we might have like a couple hundred different signals that we use, which are kind of like smaller little sub strategies. Are really helpful too. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways, but we have to convince an investor that like everything is that we're good enough at like a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And that's what really matters, I think. The other thing I guess I should mention is like finance. Finance isn't like a winner take all industry. Winner take all, I mean like social media is a good
Hmm.
example of winner take all because like China has like WeChat, and it
Yeah.
pretty much like dominates the entire industry at this point. Or like in America, in terms of if you want to watch videos, like YouTube, dominates. And so that's like a
Hmm.
winner take all. But in finance, you got like JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, in China, there's like a dozen investment banks and like all of them coexist alongside one another. And that's a
Hmm.
great thing that like just by design of the industry that you were allowed to have. And so, yeah, so you can exist in this industry without being like number one in the world at like everything. You just need to
Hmm.
be good enough and know how to beat the markets and be above average.
Yeah, I think somewhere you wrote it somewhere, but how to survive is actually really important because like I think it's surprising to me that many firm failed because of operation reason, not their performance, right?
Mhm.
So and do you know like how have you designed the company to avoid that trap people? Because you talk about how you have studied the firm, but I'm just curious, like what have you actually done to prevent those mistakes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, one thing is we just made those mistakes and then learn the hard way, from like bad experiences, like, oh, this is not how we should be doing stuff. I'll tell you, like, I don't know how many of you guys have heard of Principles by Ray Dalio. Like,
Oh, I love that book. It's actually back here.
oh, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have the book too somewhere. But so like, he has all these principles, right? And like,
Yeah.
a lot of them are great and stuff. So when we actually started our hedge fund, I didn't even know who Ray Dalio was back then, but like,
Mm.
we like established our own kind of company principles of like, what we think is right, what we think is wrong, both in terms of culture, in terms of money, in terms of everything in the company in general. And so I wrote down this set of principles, and it turns out like almost all of them were wrong.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. I thought it was. I wish they were right, but most of the principles were wrong,
Mhm.
actually. So like,
What were some of them, if you recall any off the top of your head?
so like one of them was on choosing our service providers.
Mhm.
So we thought like, okay, because we're, we look like kids, we don't have a lot of experience, and we're just starting up. And so we don't have reputation. Why don't we hire the biggest brand lawyer, the biggest, accountant firm, the biggest auditor, like let's get a big four accounting firm. Let's get the biggest, auditor and biggest administrator that works at a really large company, and a lawyer with like a good reputation, and everything else too, like compliance and like board members. Like let's make them all big names, right? And it turns out that one is we wasted so much money on these people, and then two is that big people service big companies. They're not made to service small startups, so they couldn't care less about us. They were always late on deadlines. One of them triggered a bunch of regulatory examinations. Like we missed regulatory deadline because our administrator was late on the financials, and because we were late on the regulatory deadline, the regulators came after us thinking that we were like breaking a law, or doing something illegal. And it really like was just a terrible experience, to go through that. And so we realized quickly, oh crap, bigger isn't always better in this industry. Like let's go for smaller companies that cater to small firms and will give us the right like time and energy that we deserve and that we're paying for. So we switched all these companies, and now we're paying a lot less. And they care about us. Now they like care about us, and they want to grow with us together. And so just realizing, any startup that you work on, just be careful about, don't just pay like the most expensive person or the most prestigious company, because sometimes they won't treat you they treat you pretty bad.
And you kind of hinted at this, but how was the competition back then? Because I don't know, I'm under the impression that many of them weren't here anymore. So how was those competition bad? Like how have you dealt with them?
Yeah, we're the last remaining high frequency trading fund in Boston, I think. And I think we're also the only, like one of the, I think out of the top 50 high frequency funds out there, we're the only one that was started in the past decade after 2008, which to me like is kind of crazy. But anyway, so the competition wise, like the good news is like one of our principles that was right was like treat your competition well. That was like the only principle that we got.
I love that.
Like treat your competition well and like be nice to them, because like you never know when they need you or you need them. And so what happens is like, one day, like we got a lot of applications from this one trading firm called like Chopper Trading. We got like 20 different people applying, and then we Googled, we're like, oh, did something happen to them? We Googled them and there's nothing in the news. And then 2 weeks later, it was finally announced that the company got acquired actually by another firm, and they did a bunch of layoffs and stuff. And people applied to us because apparently, we were nice to them for many years. And people were like, well, who are the nice people we want to work with, and they decided, well, since our firm doesn't exist anymore, let's go apply to these guys. So it was great that I'm so glad that we were friendly to them. And also it just makes you feel good, when you're friends with people and like, you're not trying to compete. Like life isn't supposed to be competition, it's like, it's all about making friends. And like, I know especially in many cultures, and even growing up in America, like, I was taught like always be number one, and like, but the problem is like, in real life, once you're an adult, like it's really not about being number one anymore. I feel like, it's like just like finding happiness for yourself and doing your own path, and like carving out whatever career, no matter where you work or what industry you work in, like just finding your happiness and finding those hobbies and passions and just living life, honestly, right? And it's not about being number one anymore. And you're not going to get a trophy for any of that. And so just kind of for me, learning that and realizing that was both very humbling, and then also helped me treat my competition, with respect and with the I don't know, just like with like as if like they're human, and so then they treated me well in the end, and I got a lot of good mentors because of that in the end too, and other stuff I was able to kind of gain just from treating people, really nice, I guess. We compete against each other in the markets when we're trading and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it's like, oh, let's just go grab drinks and like chill and hang out, because like we're all trying to work towards the same goals and make a living for ourselves. And so, but why not?
No, there's like life principles I want to ask you, but also you talk about mentors. What were some of the biggest turning points, and how have mentors helped you or not help you during those points?
Yeah, it's funny because like I feel like I never had any mentors when I when I needed it.
I heard that so often. Like people always tell me that they got famous and then they got mentors, which is not the point of mentors. Yeah.
Exactly. When I was a student, I definitely actually was pretty proactive. I asked for mentors and would get ignored by like every other like person, and just realize, oh, maybe am I a bad person? Am I a bad mentee? But then it was only after I had reached past my turning points. So I'll tell you one turning point, which was like during one of my internships. There was one person in the company who was like really mean to me, and I remember he just would yell at me all the time. He wasn't even on my team, but he would just come over and like yell at me because I wasn't smiling enough, and just really stuff that didn't make me feel really good. And then and every morning I had to say good morning as a task, like because I sat next.
So you have to get coffee and say good morning.
Yeah, so I had to turn, because I sat next to the door, and so my job was like good morning, like almost like a secretary. And so then like this guy never said good morning back to me. Like he was always he would say good morning to my boss right next to me and completely just walk over me and just go over there every morning. And it got really I didn't care. I was like, okay, whatever, I'm a lowly intern, I know my place, right? But then like about 6 or 7 years later, after we launched a hedge fund, we were already trading and doing a decent job, I think. We got a phone call from the office from this company again. And one of my assistants picked up the call and was like, hey, who's this guy? And I heard them, and she's writing it down. I'm like, oh my gosh, wait, that's like this company, right? And so I picked up the phone and I'm like, just give me your name and I'll send you our email, and they want to invest in our hedge fund. And so I got the name, and then we Googled him. And we're like, oh my gosh, that's the guy who like I say good morning to every morning. He just ignored me. And like he didn't recognize me. He didn't know it was me or like my fund. He just thought he was just doing his job and looking for companies to invest in, and he wanted to invest in us. And I was like, no, we're not accepting this guy. He's like, but it was the first moment in my life where I was like, holy crap, the tables have totally turned. This guy is now begging to invest in our business.
Yeah.
I get to say no to him for once. I get to ignore him for once. And it did feel pretty good to, to be able to finally do that. So
I love the moment. Okay, so you were proactive, but it's hard to secure mentors when you really need them. But who are the people who are helping you when you weren't that famous, and how have you found them?
Yeah, I just talk to whoever. I think for me, instead of like having formal mentors, because I feel like mentor implies like what do you call it? This kind of relationship that's uneven. But for me, one thing that's helped a lot, and I realized over time, is like to find, we call it like sponsors or champions. So like these are people who you're like equal to, right, in a company. It could be in your company on your team, or maybe in a different company, like maybe a friend you were classmates with who works in a different company, and you guys can be like, hey, we'll help each other out. When I see a fun event that's relevant to you, I'll send it to you. When I see a fun like award nomination, I'll make sure to nominate you. And I think that was really helpful, because that way you learn to help each other, and you learn like you're valuable too. One of the things I always talk about a lot is actually when I was in college, I used to have like a child mentality, like a child. I'm a kid. My professors are adults. My mentors are adults, or like full-time workers. They're like adults. And so I used to treat them, I used to treat myself like a kid, I guess, and be very like, I don't know, just the way I talked about myself and stuff like that. And then I learned after, actually what happened was we were talking to a recruiter one day, and he was like, you guys are just kids, you're not worth our time of day. Why should we work with a bunch of kids? And I was like, holy crap. And I was a little offended by that, like, because I was already like 22 years old, and he's calling me, I get it, I'm a kid compared to him. But I was like, wait a second, he's calling me a kid because I treat myself like a kid. And like, I never brought my value to his table. All I'm doing is begging him for his business, right? Or investors, I just beg for their money. But then I changed my attitude completely after that. So I was like, okay. So for instance, like a good way to apply this is if you're, I always like offer something first, like, how can I help you? Even to investors, I'm like, how can I help you first? And then I ask them for money if, it comes down to it. But just providing your value first, I realize is super helpful. And then, so for instance, if you're in college, you're applying to like jobs and the recruiter hasn't responded yet, you can be like, hey, by the way, like I am a part of my college's investment club. I'll forward this, investment, or no, I'll forward your job postings to my entire club if you like, or
Mhm.
maybe I'm a part of this other club on campus, like a business club on campus, and we'd love for you to speak to our club on campus, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, as a recruiter, it's really hard to say no. It's like, oh, I got to respond. That's a great opportunity. So it's like, even as a student, knowing like how valuable you are, and then providing that value for companies, if companies that you want to help and that whose job you want, is very a really great way to also help out and find your value, know your value, and then treat yourself with that respect that you deserve.
And tell me more about how you did as a young investor, young trader, and how did you do that favor to the investors?
Yeah, so I guess as a young investor and trader on my part, it was a lot of it was really scary. First off, like suddenly going from college, where college all you do is like you study for an exam and then you get grades, and it's like a very structured system. But then
Mhm.
after college, suddenly it's like there's no longer any structure, right?
Mhm.
And everyone goes off to do their own thing, and so it's up to you to figure out, okay, what do you want to do for once in your life,
Mhm.
so definitely for me, it was really scary to transition into the role of I guess role of a CEO,
Mhm.
role of like a partner in a firm like this, and then understanding like, oh, I got to start bringing value to everybody, including investors, and as soon as I started bringing the value, though, like asking them for like, hey, what about, have you considered I don't know, doing this speaking opportunity over here,
Mhm.
have you considered investing in this startup over here, and then they started to think of me as like an equal and as a part of their like thought leadership community. And as soon as I started joining that community, then the investment started to come in. And so yeah, it was a process, but I'm grateful to have the opportunity to kind of learn that over time.
Yeah, I haven't always tell people, either from networking to cold emailing to anything, right? There's always something you can bring to the table. It's really about like, have you thought about it from their end? Because investors are always looking for good leads and good investments, and recruiters are always looking for good students who may not attend career fair. So no matter where you're at, many of our audience I think are in college or early career. There's something you can bring to the table. Like even if you are working at a big company, you have the fresh perspective that people in the industry don't have anymore. So there's something in that. So there's just so much power in finding what you have, but also having the awareness to know what they don't know.
Exactly. And also I think a lot of it's cultural, because like, as for me growing up in a Chinese family, I learned like respect your elders, right? That's like the first thing you learn is like treat your elders with so much respect. And like, but I think in the workplace though, you can respect your elders while providing your own value, providing your own input as well. And so and also, it does take time to find a culture like that as well. I'll be honest, like not all companies might have the same kind of culture as well that you can have your voice be heard. But when you're applying to companies, 100%, you can, respectfully ask them and give them opportunities at the same time, and that's totally okay too.
Yeah. And I don't know if you have, how have you dealt with rejection?
Oh man.
So yeah, do you just go back and cry and write in your journal, or do you? I feel like you would do something back. Like what actions do you take?
I have, definitely cried and like left my office crying some days for sure. The worst rejections are like the ones where they kind of insult you when they reject you. I'd rather just ignore me, but sometimes if someone says, oh, she's never going to succeed, or oh, like
Mhm.
what a waste of my time, when someone says, oh, she's a waste of time, that hurts every time, because like, and I think it's okay, by the way, to feel hurt or to feel sad, because rejection is, we're all human. It's like the most human thing to
Yeah.
feel emotion when someone doesn't like you, right? And that's
Mhm.
okay. It's funny because actually my co-founders, I think, and also my team in general, a lot of people on my team are a lot less or what do you call it, a lot more chill than me. So like a
Nice.
lot yeah, I'm like a lot more sensitive, and that's okay. Everyone has a different level of like how much they care about issues and stuff. I
Mhm.
care a lot more. Like I'm the type of person where if I read a Facebook post that like I disagree with, I get really like, oh, so angry,
Yeah.
and so, but I learned to deal with it over time. I think it hurts for me like every time I get rejected by any investor,
Mhm.
because I spent time with them. I literally spent like 5 hours, talking to this investor, and then they said no to me. Oh, what did I do wrong, right?
Yeah.
But I think over time it gets better, and you just kind of understand like time heals every wound, and eventually, like as a part of we learn that rejection is normal as well. So if you know that it's normal and that it's nothing personal, then you start to feel like, okay, that's fine. And for me, like I call it a mountain of rejections. Like every time I get rejected, Microsoft, the pitch contest I lost, it's like, okay, here's this mountain of rejections, and it just goes in this pile and it just keeps on building higher and higher, and that's okay. And that's like completely normal. Here's my mountain of rejections, and then move on. Okay, go to the next opportunity. And then eventually you find that investor who says yes, or the job or the company that says yes to you after this whole mountain of rejections behind you. But also I think it's more meaningful because after you get no 100 times and then you get one yes, and you're like, oh my gosh, you're so much happier, right? Versus if you keep getting 100 yeses, then life is kind of boring almost, right? Like, you're not aiming high enough maybe, or you're not doing enough, right? That maybe like you're playing it too safe. I don't know. But if every company says yes to you, wow, like that's incredible. But also it's more exciting when you get a bunch of no's and then you get a yes and you're like, yes. It just feels so great.
Yeah, I think that really ties in with when you said it's a roller coaster, right? Because I think one advice I got, and I was really thankful for that, is don't get too many successes, because if that's the case, you're not trying hard enough. And that's why I would always aim to challenge myself, which I think there's downside about challenging myself too much. But at least at this moment, I feel like all my growth come from the moments where I thought I couldn't do it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, what is life without like those struggling, the triumphs and the tribulations together, right? Like you need to have one in order to kind of have the other in your life too. And so that balance is it's a healthy thing to have, actually.
Yeah, and many people may have asked this question, so I'm going to relay it over. How do you have the courage to reinvent yourself constantly? Because some of the challenges, many of them, I guess, it's like things your friends or family haven't had before, right? Like losing millions of dollars in a day and having those like crazy rejection from people who insulted you 7 years, 6 years ago. So how did you find those peace, if that is the case, or calm, like, or support from your life?
Yeah, I mean, definitely for whatever you do in your career, right? Having a support group is always really helpful. It could just be a group of close friends that you hang out with, and on the weekends, you can relax. And sure, they don't understand your industry. I don't understand my friends' industries either, who work in like, who are doctors and lawyers. I have no idea like what they're doing, right? But like it's really nice to just have someone to open up to. In the startup community, actually, like we host events. So I started a group called like Founders Therapy, and it's just literally a group of founders, and we just open up about our life struggles. And one time, like I was being sued, and I opened up about like my lawsuit, and then someone was like, "How many of you guys have been sued?" And like over half the room raised their hand. I was like, "Wow, really?"
Such
Like
an impressive group.
like, wow, either you guys are all really impressive or we're all really crazy, but at least like we're not alone. That's the biggest thing that matters. And so no matter what career you join, just doing those meetups and those groups and finding that community of people to open up about in your life is just for me was really important. But what's interesting is actually my co-founder, especially both of my co-founders are both very introverted. So they're like the opposite of me. Like one of them doesn't even have a Facebook, doesn't use social media, period. And that's okay. He doesn't need that in his life to feel like satisfied. It just depends on your personality. For me, I rely on like other people to like be near me to feel like happy, but everyone has different things that give them energy and that drain them energy. For me, like just so happens like having other people give me energy. So I like to find the community of people everywhere I go.
Got it. I like the self-awareness and just the intention behind that, right? Because like community is really important, and that's what I have been telling the audience, right? Because I think especially during COVID, it's we meant like at least many of the people in the States like couldn't meet our friends or like go to the workplace, or just go to hang out with the group we used to hang out. But the community aspect is still really important. It doesn't mean that we have less challenges. We actually have more. So that's why we need to be even more intentional to cultivate those relationships, either just to following up or just by finding people who share your values, and then constantly building upon that.
Exactly.
And we have around 10 minutes left, so I'm going to shift from career into life. So you have done a lot. You are writing a book. You have just, what kind of legacy do you want to leave on the world?
Oh man, that's tough. I just want to like At this point, while I'm alive, at least, like, inspire people to do whatever they want to pursue. And, whether that's a career in finance or in another industry, just be able to show that this is possible, and I'm in an industry where if you think about what does a hedge fund manager look like, you think about, I don't know, like Ray Dalio, Warren Buffett, Steve Schwartzman, like all these kind of old white dudes, but I think it'll be nice when people can have more diversity in this industry. And so hopefully you guys will be inspired to pursue whatever you're pursuing, even if people usually don't look like you in whatever industry you join, right? And that's okay to carve your own path out there. For me, like I define success. Actually, my friend told me this definition first. He said like success is the number of hours you can play video games during the day. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so true. And like at first it didn't make sense to some people, but it's like basically success is the number of hours you can afford to do the thing you truly want to do during the day without like getting into trouble or getting any consequences, right?
Yeah.
And so for him, that was like playing his favorite video games during the day without any consequences, at the end of the day. And so I was like, oh, that's a great definition. And so I hope to be able to, one day as well, spend time doing. I mean, now as well, I'm lucky in that my startup is the thing that I really want to do. It's exactly how I define success. But yeah, so just focus on those things that keep you waking up in the morning. Oh, people always ask me as well, like, should I start a company? And I'll just say like, just do the thing that makes you want to wake up. Like, don't worry about success rate. Success rate in hedge funds, if I knew back then, like it was was it like a 1% success rate over 5 years for a hedge fund, it's terrible. If I knew the statistics, like, I'd be pretty discouraged and stuff, but I just started it out of passion and like, because that was what would wake me up in the morning compared to, working, for me personally, I personally prefer just, doing my own thing. And so I was like, oh yeah, I will wake up, if I did this company, I will feel excited and energized, like I'm living my life. And so that was the only reason for it. And even if it fails, I can go move on and do something else. And, nobody ever says, oh, I regret doing a startup. They'll be like, oh, my startup failed, but I got like 100 opportunities, or I have many friends whose startups failed and then they went to like Harvard Business School, great. That's amazing. Or they went to go become a vice president at like Goldman Sachs or somewhere huge. And if they had started Goldman Sachs as an analyst, they would not be VP after until like 6 or 7 years, right? So the path that they took made them, I think, was a head start for their career, no matter if their startup failed or succeeded. So just kind of do the thing that you enjoy, whether it's working at a large firm or your own firm or a small firm, or no company, volunteering or being a full-time parent, right? Just whatever it is that you're enjoying in the moment. You don't need to defend your decision to anybody. You don't owe anyone. Maybe your parents, will be concerned, but besides that, like, people you love, like, you don't owe the public anything.
Yeah. And wow, that's such an awesome way. And for some reason, I was hearing something else. You said that, would you say you're at that level, like you could do whatever you love during the entire day, or was there something holding back?
Oh man. I think for the longest time, I held myself back a little bit, to be honest. I think we kind of all do, because in college, you all feel a pressure of like study computer science, or like engineering, math, or something practical, and then get a job at a big, my parents' definition of success is like, oh, go work at like Google or IBM for 40 years of your career. But that's because their generation is so totally different from our generation. Like stability was more important for their generation during a time in the world where, like there were still a lot of people, a lot of countries in poverty. But now, you see many countries, like we all are pretty privileged, to be honest. And there's technology, everyone's so connected today. And so it's like the definition of a job is changing as well. Like there's gig economy, like I have friends who like sell Airbnb, like they're renting Airbnbs at night, driving Uber during the day, like,
Wow.
doing like TaskRabbit and like running around, like, there's, you can have like, I think average millennial today has 17 jobs before retirement, and it's actually growing higher. So like for the next generation, you'll see probably like 20 or over 20 jobs during your lifetime, and that's considered normal. And so why I like to say that is because if you want to consider changing companies, just know like that's okay. Look, it's like two out of 17. Okay, it's just another part of your journey, right? To discover yourself. And there's no such thing as like a job that you like 100% of the time. everyone always thinks, oh, the grass is greener when I go work at this bank over here instead of this bank, you know, but then you join and you're like, oh, you know, I should have stayed at the other bank. And so you always think that, but then it's like, well, if you like your job like 80% of the time, you're probably better off than like most of the population, even like higher than 50%. Like every other day, if you're like, oh, I love my job, like that, then I think that's pretty darn good, to be honest, because I have some friends who hate their job every single day. And I think that's when you need to decide, like, maybe I should change my situation and you know, look for something new. But yeah, so it's tough, but the world isn't perfect and you just have to find yourself through that process.
Yeah, I love it. And tell us more. So you're writing the book. Tell us more about the book. What's next? What else are you launching? What else are you doing next?
So I have a data company actually called Databento, and it's based on the concept of like a bento box, but like you can buy different data sets from different vendors in smaller slices. But basically what happened was, in my hedge fund, we wasted over $1 million on financial like market data, alternative data. And we realized, wait a second, why are we buying these bulky data sets? Can we just sell it in little pieces? So we decided, why not just create a data company to sell in pieces? That way it decreases the barrier to entry, increases access to data, and, you know, all the accessibility from home. And so been working on that. We're going to launch in the next couple of weeks. I'm really
Awesome.
excited and nervous to launch a product for the first time in a really long time. And then what else am I doing? And then, yeah, writing the book. I'm excited about the book mainly because it was a weight off my shoulders personally. So just so you guys are all aware, like I was interrogated, I was sued, I was beaten up, I was interrogated by the FBI. Like I had so much stuff happen to me, and I developed like PTSD and like all these like mental, like, you know, like problems because of it. And I had to get help. I had to like, and you know, I kind of talk a little bit about that too, but just through starting the fund and everything I had gone through to kind of get to where the sacrifices and, you know, the mistakes we made that led us to this path. And so but I also do talk about in the book, like, you know, throughout my whole childhood, I don't know about you guys, like I was taught, like, you know, do something good for the world, just be a good person, and like give back to people who are, you know, in poverty and like less privileged than you. And then I ended up literally in finance. I'm making no difference in the world. High frequency trading, no difference in society, you know. And so it talks about that dilemma, moral, ethical dilemma that ended up how I spiraled down that path as well. So yeah, so definitely really looking forward to getting that published, hopefully next year at some point.
And what is the name?
It's called, well, tentatively, it's going to be called The Finance Snake, a memoir about my $1 billion hedge fund.
Love it. Love it. And just as if people want to learn more about you, your work, maybe work at Databento, how could they learn more and reach out?
Yeah, so you can check out our website. It's just www.databento.com. I can type it in here as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like pretty straightforward. And then you can also add me on LinkedIn. That's like or Twitter. Those are like my primary platforms if you ever want to get involved or keep in touch with me as well. And yeah, I'm really grateful for all your time though. And, you know, thank you so much, Charlene, for doing this.
Yeah, this is so fun. There are so many more questions, but in the interest of time, I will leave it here. And so I will post Christina's LinkedIn, Twitter on our page, Facebook page, and you can reach out to her if you want to learn more. Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah. Hope you have an awesome day.
Yep, you too. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day ahead of you.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.